what I try to do with these things, and operate help sessions as needed. And since we're in a crazy sort of 5-week block here, 5 weeks pushing, then we probably will, I'll offer these sessions, same schedule, twice a week, for the last, for the next 3 weeks after this week. And, I'll be here whether anybody shows up or not. If nobody shows up, then I'll, go have a glass of wine or something, just to at least make the evening somewhat beneficial. So we'll kind of play that way, but I do need to know, I obviously the way the course is structured, it's very, very hard for me to know, what you have questions about, or what you're not getting, or what you're not seeing. Obviously there are videos. Let me kind of tinker with this a little bit. There are videos that are from some this year, some last year, that I have done over the years in terms of introducing sort of the major themes, major topics, and the sequence in which I think stats makes better sense, starting with notions about measurement and error, and looking at notions about distributions, in particular the normal distribution. And so it's kind of a logical pathway. Questions about JASP, I'll deal with that. I think that one is a pretty found it to be a program or a mechanism that works really fine, and seems to have a simplicity to it that students appreciate. It's not a difficult program to manage. It's just getting it loaded and figuring out a few basics, and then you're in pretty good shape from there. So what are your questions?
So I don't have any questions just yet. I just feel bad that there's like all this dead space. I'm really just trying to get through the reading and start to play around. Maybe this is a premature question, but is there any chance that this could not be 5 weeks?
Yeah, my take on it is that we kind of live by the contracts that they give us, and the contracts this year were pretty clear about 5-week sessions. I don't have, I've taught this as a 10-week block before, and it's done pretty well, and I don't really have any problems in terms of be extending beyond the 5 weeks, but with the exception that my life adds 40 some more students 1st of July.
Okay.
So that creates the issue, because I have 2 sections that I'm responsible for that I thought were 10-week sessions, and that turned out to be 5-week sessions starting the 1st of July. And it was a surprise to me, but and both of them are loaded. Both of them are 20+ students.
Yeah, I think it was a surprise to us too, because our epidemiology class is 10 weeks.
Right.
Of all the classes I would have wanted to be 10 weeks, it would have been stats.
Well, that's kind of a preconception, maybe, that we can kind of induce you to break just a little bit, because in actual terms of concepts, stats is not, there's not a long laundry list of concepts to deal with. There's only a couple, 3 concepts, and then there's a whole bunch of different applications that are applied to kind of different scenarios you might run into, whether you're working with groups or depending on what kind of data you're working with or whatever. And so it's kind of like a menu process in which you start with okay, here are my first decisions, here's my second decision, here's my third decision. And then the actual stats part of it is pretty straightforward and relatively simple. I mean, you just have to know, what constitutes significance and what does that mean?
Mhm.
And so, but that's scenario based. I mean, it's based upon the data you have and the way the groups are set up, or whether there are groups, or and what
Right.
kind of data points you have, whether you have those categorical data points where people are just in group A or group B or box one or box two, as opposed to scale kind of data, which is a value on an extended scale. And so those, as you go through those 2 or 3 steps of decisions, uh, it almost self-selects into certain statistics. And then understanding how they work is not as necessary as understanding how they work.
How is more important than why? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, essentially. How does the logic work? Because the stats is just a mechanical process tied to the logic. And so how it works is just as important as kind of why we do these particular things. Uh, and so it is a bit of a mechanical process, and one that's once again based on just 2 or 3 real simple little principles. And so it is feasible to do in 5 weeks. Is it desirable? Probably not. But it's kind of the world we live in. But what I what I intend to do, and what I intend to kind of offer to you, is that, okay, let's see what we do in 5 weeks and see where we are. And if we've got a bunch of people that are happy where they are, then those folks kind of go on and go away. And if we have a few folks that are not happy with where they are, then we just tend to that. I mean, we just do what we can do to bring those folks up to speed. So that's what I mean by I'm not wedded to 5 weeks, but given
Okay.
the fact it's structured that way.
Well, so my job is in health informatics. So I was looking for the statistics, as crazy as that might sound. And so I really wanted to dig into it a little bit more. And I feel like 5 weeks, I might be working so hard to understand that I might not be able to really use it as much at work with people that are really, doing health informatics and truly.
Right. No, we'll take you there. I mean, that's not to me, that's not an issue. If at the end of 5 weeks, you're not where you hoped you would be with it, then we'll just keep going.
Okay.
Um,
That makes me.
It will create, a lot of the big courses that I've got coming in July are sort of autopilot too, in that all of the discussions and all the work and all the resources and all that are already up.
Okay.
And it's material that I've already produced, or material that can be modified from where I used it in a different class, say a semester ago or something like that. So it's not like I'm starting these classes from scratch. It's just that they get compressed, and there's a lot of self-reflection and things like that in these classes that are coming up, because they're classes are focused around data-driven decision making and leadership positions. And so
Yeah.
it's people having to figure out how they work and how they fit and how it fits into things. So I'm not anticipating that I'm going to be so busy with these classes coming in July that I can't, continue to, mentor through some of this other stuff. And
Okay.
we'll finagle the grading pieces of it, because the push comes to shove, I'll do, half dozen incompletes into the first 5 weeks and pull them in the end of the second 5 weeks.
Okay.
And, you know, that's up to me. That's not up to the university to decide whether I want to do that or not. So,
Would there be any value in, I mean, obviously don't know where I'll be in 5 weeks, but would there be any value in, even if I'm okay with where I am, in maybe just being able to listen in to what's going on in the next, in the other help
sure,
sessions,
yeah,
5 weeks?
yeah. And that's why I'm recording them too, so that you can kind of, you know, fast forward to the good parts or fast forward to the parts where you kind of don't have questions about. I haven't gotten into indexing those things yet because, quite frankly, I just don't quite want to go there. I'm not a media guy, but I know how to do it. I just don't want to do it. It's a little bit more complicated than I need at this point. But it is, yeah, I mean, feel free to do that. I mean, listen in. If you can't be here, you know, look at the video.
Okay,
Yeah, do it that way. And then at the end of 5 weeks, we'll see where we are. And if we need to go a bit further, I mean, you have a promise. We'll take you a bit further.
okay, thank you.
I'm no happier about the 5 weeks than anybody else, quite frankly, but you know, it's what my contracts say, so.
Okay,
I think it's just, we started off running and it was a lot to start off running. I think that's.
Yeah, it is,
and
yeah,
then we
but
only-
yeah, if you start running, you can always slow down.
That's what I think that's what Maria was trying to say. Oh, we started off running and then here we only got 5 weeks to do it. And so we're trying to, well, I mean, it's really a time management issue on my part. So,
Well, you
It's a
have
lot.
to, you know, you kind of have to pay attention to, um, you know, I take the videos at a non-technical, fairly practical level. If you really look at those, you'll understand there's only two concepts I'm really kind of, you know, working with or worried about so far. And one of those is the nature of error, because, you know, there's always error in measurement. Doesn't matter how good the measurement is, there's always error. Some of it's random, you know, because the world is full of random error. That's kind of what the world's made out of. And if we didn't have random error, we wouldn't be here, because we're a mutation built on millions of other mutations. And so that kind of puts us where we are. If we didn't have error, we wouldn't be here. But sometimes there's error that can be caused by circumstances. For example, being in one group versus another, being male versus female, being you know, African American versus you know, Caucasian. I mean, there are all kinds of factors that can induce error that's not random. It is structural, and it's based on the, you know, sort of the structure surrounding individuals. And so you know, all of statistics is simply saying, okay, here's how much random error we would expect, pure probability. Here's how much random error we would expect. Okay, how much do we see? How much error do we see? And so if we see more than we would expect by chance, then there's a possibility we've got some error in there that's based on differences between subjects, characteristics differences between subjects. And if that's the case, you know, all of statistics is looking at that ratio between what we'd expect random error to look like and the actual error that we can measure. And that ratio is really what all the statistics are about. And what's the likelihood that it would be that big, or what's the likelihood it would be that small? So it is all a matter of probabilities, but it's based upon this notion of error, of random error. And then the other piece of it is that there is a structure to the universe, and it happens in all random things. And that structure to the universe is called the normal distribution. And that's not a mathematical concept, it's a purely observable philosophical notion that most of us are most alike everybody else in lots of ways, and we're different in very few ways. Meaningful ways, but very few ways. And so we can anticipate at what point does that difference really constitute a difference, and is the rest of it just random fluctuation. So it is all about this error, and it is all about normal distributions. And every single statistic feeds off of that notion. I mean, every single statistic that we'll look at that does any sort of comparison or so. Hang on, so let me flip over to one of these things here. All right, I just shared up my little notepad thingy here. Let's see if I can get this over here. Okay. And everything about any statistic essentially is always looking at this ratio between what we would expect to see as random error and on top of that ratio what we see as observed error. Now, obviously, we estimate both those things because in reality, we can never know all of that. We can't know, what random error really looks like. We can't know what observed error really is. I mean, we can kind of estimate it. And so all we do are create estimates of those. And then we look to see, what is this ratio and what is the likelihood that this ratio would exist purely by chance. And, we define chance in terms of normal distributions, different kinds of normal distributions, but basically normal distributions. Because at infinity, when we know everything, when we have all the data and we can know, all the data points, every single last one of them, those data points will be distributed in a normal fashion. And that's just a phenomenon of the universe. It's not a created thing. It's not a mathematical thing. It's just a philosophical phenomenon that when we know everything, we have what are called normal distributions. And so as we back away from knowing everything, as we back away into having people in groups or having people different as defined by different characteristics or certain characteristics, how sure can we be that what we see is random versus what we see being some sort of systematic or structural bias built into things. So that's all statistics is. I mean, if it were any more complex than that, they probably wouldn't let me teach it. But everything beyond that point's an application. And this is the only formula that matters, this observed error over random error. And if you look at all statistics, it'll have a version of that sort of notion embedded in how it's calculated, but we don't worry about that because we kind of understand the idea of what's going on there, and we know what the results look like. And as long as we do that, we're fine.
So then is statistics then, I don't know how to ask this question. What is the difference between statistics and modeling?
Modeling is a nice name for certain types of statistics.
Okay.
Yeah, truly it is. I mean, modeling is built on what's called the general linear model. Now there are some, sometimes the modeling is a little bit different because we make different assumptions. We don't assume that data might be normal, and we make different assumptions. But modeling is just one of any number of techniques, and there are all kinds of modeling techniques, but it's any number of different techniques that are based on what's called the general linear model, GLM. And, you know, things like structural modeling, things like hierarchical modeling, you know, all those things that we talk about as being kind of highfalutin words, they all are based on one simple principle, and that is that, you know, error is predictable, and we can make some assumptions. And if we make those assumptions, then we can use known distributions to try to understand what's the likelihood that certain things will happen. Because when we talk about statistics and we talk about significant models or you know, what will be the outcome under models, different models, if different things play out. You know, one of my jobs a few years back was I was a vice president for institutional effectiveness at a mid-sized community college in Virginia. And I was also the director of institutional research. And so, you know, it was a fairly small staffed college. And so, you know, basically I was doing, you know, two hats at the same time, in that I was generating data and reporting data that had to be reported. And I was doing prediction models to predict enrollment characteristics, predict you know, how many people would come back second semester, you know, just all kinds of stuff like that. And so, you know, we would kind of build the models as needed. And there wasn't one particular model that you know, I always relied on. There were, you know, individual models for individual needed outcomes. If we needed to predict enrollment, I'd built a couple of models for that. If we needed to predict retention, I'd built a couple of models for that. If we needed, you know, all kinds of things like that. But they were all based around the general kind of structure of what's called the general linear model, GLM. And so there is no real difference between when you say statistics and say modeling is a brand of statistics. When you say analytics and statistics, same damn thing. You know, analytics is a more sellable term. But the things that, you know, they teach in an analytics curriculum is not any different than the things that I would teach in a advanced stats class. And so there is no, you know, these things that we assume that we attach terms to, they are that, they're terms. But there's only one real overall structural notion of statistical analysis, whether it's modeling or analytics or stats or whatever. And that is that we have this fascination with trying to understand error, and, you know, how much of the error that we are able to observe is actually random versus systematic or systemic. The big rule in statistics is that we never know everything we need to know. But we always have to keep in mind that, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And that's not just doublespeak. That's just saying that there are, when we observe data in the real world, whether it's a medical world or whether it's a educational world or whether it's an industrial world or whatever, when we observe data in the real world, we can never know what all variables might be at play if we're not looking at them. And so we call, in some of the research, we call them confounded variables. In some research areas, they call them unknowables. Well, they're not unknowable. They're just unknowable because you're not looking for them. You're not looking at them.
So is that different from when you know you have a negative space of data? We have a lot of conversations about data that maybe doesn't exist, that we know is impacting the results that we're getting.
Same thing. Same thing. These are this is data that's attached to confounding variables, and you know, if you're not looking for, well, okay, so in medicine these days, almost everything in medicine these days is attached to, you know, genetic predictions. I mean, we're doing a lot of the DNA research and the mRNA research and all that are really predictions. Because when you talk about predictors or you talk about precursors or things like that, you're really talking about, you know, a predicted probability of something happening. Now, true, if a particular gene pattern, you know, is unique one time out of 5 billion, we can pretty well attach that to a person if we know what that person's gene pattern looks like. But even that has error in it. It just doesn't have an awful lot, but it does have error in it. And occasionally, you know, those outcomes are wrong. You know, occasionally you know, the genetic treatment that's developed for a particular person's DNA turns out not to be right, and the person dies or isn't helped. But we don't really, most of the time we're not looking for that, so we can't really know that. But we always have an element of error that we cannot know. And I mean, you call it a negative space, and that's as good a term as any, I think. But you know, we have to live with what we do know, and the probability of decisions that we can make with what we do know. You know, the only real bad thing about analytics and you know, sort of the informatics you were talking about and things like that, is that we never know when we're wrong, because statistics generally talks only to groups and not to individuals. All the different statistical models, all the different statistical techniques are outcomes related to groups of people. Now, within that group, there is a distribution, once again, a normal distribution. And so we know that people will be different from each other within a group because that's just normal. I mean, we vary. We're not the same. We have lots of variation. And so, you know, that particular variability makes it impossible for us to take group outcomes and say, okay, based on this group outcome, we're going to say this one individual over here is a certain way. Now, one of the handouts that's up on As You Learn, I'm not going to pull it up now, but it's the fallacies, with the research fallacies from actually that was from Trochim. You can find, you know, a zillion sources for it. But if we know things about groups, we can't necessarily and shouldn't, I won't even say necessarily, we shouldn't try to make predictions about individuals. We can make individual predictions about individuals as a group, but we can't say this person should be that way, or this person will be that way, or this person will be that way. And that's the hole in all these predictive models and analytics and things like that, is that we can never know how individuals will behave or turn out, because all we can know is what groups look like.
But I think we do, I mean, maybe not everyone does, but I think we do that at
Oh, of
VA.
course we do. Yeah, do it every day. Yeah, we predict who's going to get a credit card. We predict who's going to get a bank card. We predict, you know, which kids are going to do well in certain programs. We predict which patients are going to do well under certain protocols. I mean, we make predictions, but at best, those predictions are groups based on group data. And so if we find out the individual doesn't react the same way as the group, it's nothing wrong with our data, our analysis. What's wrong is our interpretation.
So
Because we can't make that.
What would be a more correct interpretation, or can you get there?
Well, let's say that we're talking about people, we're talking about females who are past childbearing age. And we do we're doing some medical research, and we're talking about females that are past childbearing age. And so we would expect that if the research we're looking at, and maybe it's a medication or maybe whatever it is, but the outcome would tell us that yes, this is an effective treatment, or no, it's not. What we should be saying, among females that are past childbearing age, we would expect their outcomes to look like this. But never, okay, for Jane, we would expect it to look this way. Well, no, we can't know. We can't know how Jane might vary from the group, but we can create the group identity and say, among those folks, females of past childbearing age, we would expect this outcome. And in essence, that's what we do. When you talk to doctors or you talk to clinicians and they say, okay, well, we're going to do this thing. We're going to try this thing. And we would expect this outcome. But they will also give you, kind of the way out. They'll say, of course, your outcome may be different. And if you look at labels on medicine bottles or treatment bottles or things like that, there's always a statement that says, just like they do at the stock market, your outcome may be different. Because that's the recognition that we're talking about group behavior, we're not talking about individual outcomes. So read those things very carefully. And when you do, you'll find that if they've done this for a living or they're pretty smart about it, they will always couch it in that language. Now, we knew that, for example, the COVID vaccines, a while back we were talking about, oh, we're going to all need a booster, we're going to all need a booster. Well, now it turns out probably not in most cases. And the limitation of how long we know that it's good for is how long anybody's had it. So people that got vaccinated a year ago, we know that their antibodies in their body is good for a year because they've had it in their body for a year. We don't have the data to say how long that's going to be. We don't know whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But, that has to happen as the data comes in. And so we never are really, really, really sure about any of this. We can only predict what the group might look like under these circumstances. We cannot predict what Jane or John or whoever looks like within the group. It's just not a predictable outcome. And so that's the kind of thing that we're always dealing with, is what is that predictable outcome. And there's a misperception that data will tell the story. No, data will give you information to help you make a decision about the story. Data will never tell the story. It will provide you more information around which to make the decision that tells the story.
What's interesting is that without the knowledge that you obviously have, or really any statistical knowledge at this point, there's one of the things that I've been working on is a contract specifically for modeling. And having to, without this background, having to explain to people very concretely, like my budget folks, why I can't give them a very specific deliverable. I can't make a prediction about, I can't tell them you will absolutely have X at the end of a year of these services, because everything we do today will inform what we do tomorrow, will inform what we do the day after.
And there's an old saying, trash in, trash out.
Yes, right. And sometimes we have to determine that it's trash. Sometimes we don't know. I mean, one of the biggest problems right now with all of the statistics that we're trying to build around COVID-19, and building an epidemiological model around that, is that we don't know what's trash and what isn't.
Yeah.
So some of what I'm paying for is for us to determine that we're never going to use that information. It's not a valid data set.
Yeah, and that's a good piece, that's a good outcome. Yeah,
Right.
honestly, that's a good outcome because it means you don't make bad decisions off bad data. But you also allows you to construct a model that says, okay, this is what the data, this is the kind of data we need to have. This is these are the requirements around that data to make sure that it's good data.
Yep.
And so that, that's the sellable you have right now is the notion that, okay, let's look at your data first and decide whether this data will answer the question you're asking. And if it won't, then let's figure out, okay, how can we generate that data that will? And that's kind of the next level that you take it to, or that a business like enterprise like you're involved in, or whatever it takes it to, is okay, well, what is it going to have to be? What is the data going to have to look like? And how can we help you generate that data so that we can make reasonable decisions within a range of probabilities, because it's always in a range of probabilities. And there are no guarantees. And anybody who wants a guarantee is a fool anyhow, because there are no guarantees. Of course, you can't tell them that, you're a fool for wanting guarantees. But, the idea that you can guarantee any statistical outcome or any data from any statistical outcome is kind of a foolish idea to begin with. You can provide insight within the range of probabilities. And that's always the limit. The example I love to use is, it's what, 1.1 in 260 some million chances to win the lottery, but somebody does. So somebody has 100% chance, and a whole lot of other people have no chance.
That's usually me.
Yeah, but it's me too. But it's if it weren't me, I wouldn't be here. Okay, but it's this idea that we can know with any certainty about an individual or a particular scenario is foolish, because you don't have the data, won't get you there. That takes more than data. That takes a little bit of luck. Luck's hard to sell.
Very. So I'm sorry if you went over this last week, because I wasn't able to make that and I have not looked at the video. But I'm looking at these JASP files, and how do I just jump in and start? I'm struggling to know what is my outcome supposed to be?
Yeah, well, a couple of videos will help. There is one tutorial that's completely about getting into JASP and working with JASP. And there's a text material I'm getting ready to put up that is produced by some of the university folks that helped develop the JASP model. I was a field tester in a lot of it, and that's why I'm fairly familiar with it. But it's a wonderful piece of software. But it is intuitive and it's easy to grasp. First, you have to have the JASP, obviously the JASP program loaded on your machine. And then if you download your JASP file onto your machine, and then you can open JASP and just load the file right in.
But what do I do with it? maybe I'm not asking right. I'm trying to connect the things that you've posted for me to read with actually going into JASP and what am I looking at? You know, maybe I'm not, maybe because I have not dug into your data files enough. Like I'm going to look at this Excel file in topic 3.
Okay, the Excel file will not necessarily, is not the best way to get into JASP. It's a doable way to get in.
Sorry, I'm trying to understand. Okay, so you may be like, well, duh, that's the whole point of the class, Kelly, but I'm trying to understand. For example, just looking at example 2 with group and gender and GPA, like what am I trying to prove? What's my impact? Why am I doing this?
Well,
What do you
yeah,
need to
okay. Let me get over there. Let me get over there.
Okay.
Which one are you looking at?
I'm just looking at example 2. I mean, we could look at example 1 as well, right? So,
Okay, go to example 1.
okay.
Yeah. Can you get into that?
This is my work computer. So I'm looking at the Excel file. I'm not saying that the software is hard. I'm saying, what am I doing with it? Like dose, you know, so, okay, so someone had 15 of something and their response is a number. And then their recode dose is either a 0 or a 1. I don't know what I'm doing with this. Am I trying to show that someone was sick and a dose of something didn't work? Am I trying? Okay, and I just did
You're
it.
separating two things. You're conflating two things here. One
Okay.
is the data file itself. The data doesn't tell you anything. It's just laying there.
Right.
The data is collected to answer certain questions. And so let's say the question is, you know, there's the recode dose, for example, splits the file in half and creates 2 groups, high dose and low dose.
Mm-hmm.
0 is low dose, 1 is high dose. A response is in this particular case, it was a response of a particular, like a drug that creates a clarity in the mind, and the response is, let's say we're dealing with the hyperactive kids, and you know it's kind of a strange notion, but if you use you know, stimulant therapies, you can help hyperactive kids to you know, respond more calmly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Ritalin effect and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, which in on its surface to me has always been crazy, but you know, that's what we know about it. And so the recode dose 0 is a low dose, 2 is a high dose. And so response is, how long does it take for individual students to become clearly focused in a class? And what is the kind of the delay between when you address a task with them and they're focused on the task in seconds?
Mm-hmm.
And so like 57 is 57 seconds. That's how long it took the individual student to, after the dosage, after the medicine was taken and given them an hour, and then you start working with them, that's how long it takes them to regain focus on a task. 57 seconds, and you know, so there's 27 seconds and 36 seconds. So let's say we ask the question, is there a difference between dosage levels in response time? In other words, we want to know, does a low dose or 0 dose, is that different from a high dose?
Mm-hmm.
That particular test is independent samples t-test. And I've got videos in there that are covering just this sort of thing. And so an independent samples t-test, I know that, let me get over on this thing. I got to finagle a couple of screens here just a little bit to get it where you can see it. Now, hopefully you can y'all still see the statistical screen?
Yes.
Okay. Notice there are, the thing that's neat about JASP is that all the windows are in one spot. They're panels in a window. And so the
Oh,
data
well,
is one panel.
that-
What's
Is that, I couldn't see this screen that you're on right now with all the numbers.
Yeah, that's the data panel.
Okay,
The next panel is the program panel.
okay,
You ask your question. And then the last panel over here is the results panel.
okay,
And so there's a results panel, a programming panel, and a data panel, always.
gotcha.
And they're always available. You're not switching between screens like in SPSS or SAS or something like that.
Okay,
And so the question we asked is whether, based on recode dose, was there a difference in response? Well, the variable that we're talking about is response, the effect variable. Think cause and effect, although we do not do causation. We infer causation. Think cause and effect. We want to know, does the dosage level, whether high or low, cause an effect on the response variable, which is how the number of seconds it takes to regain focus. And so the outcome variable is the response time. The grouping variable is the coded dosage, recode dosage. This is what's called a student's t-test. The hypothesis is that group 1 is not equal to group 2. In other words, the hypothesis is that you know, our folks are different from each other. We won't talk about effect size right yet. We'll kick in the descriptives piece. And as you've noticed, as I was doing those things, the results updated all the way through. And so we had two groups, the low dose and high dose, 0 and 1, 48 subjects in each one of them. The mean response time was 44.52 for the high dose and 39.71 for the low dose. And so the t-value, which really is sort of meaningless to us, but the probability that if I said the two groups were not equal to each other is 3.6%, 0.036. And so we would say that's a significant outcome. And the outcome is that the low dose has students returning on task quicker than the high dose.
okay. So all that made sense to me, but I must be overlooking something, because how would I know what that data set was referring to? How would I know that that data set was referring, like, for your example, to kids with hyperactivity, and what
Because
kind
you'd
of,
have a code book. You'd have a code book to work. Some of these earlier examples, I don't bother to give you a whole lot of information about the data set, simply because that's not the point at that point. The point is just understanding how the data works in the program.
and how the screens work and
How the
all-
screens work and what
Okay.
this means, what this, you know, 0.036 means. This means there's a 3.6% chance that you would be wrong in saying these two groups are different from each other.
Ah. And that's what the videos will tell me.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. So to jump in, I need to watch the videos and then play around in JASP.
Videos are as good as anything to work with. Yeah.
Okay.
Start with the videos. Then you can expand out into reading material if you need to. The online text material are all very searchable. And so you can search for, particular topics or particular stats, things like that. But the videos will probably get you the most currency right now.
Okay. I'm fearful that I'll end up with a midterm and I'll have no idea what you're looking.
Let me spend a second to talk about grading. First off, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I don't give a damn about grades one way or the other. Never have, never will. And this is my 42nd year in higher education at the university level or college level. The whole point of, in my mind, of a skill class, and this is a skill class, this is a high level skill class. The whole notion of a skill class is to develop a skill. And I would expect that you would be better at it at the end than you are at the beginning, because otherwise, why take the class? Well, what's the point? And so it's a skills sort of notion. There's a type of learning, it's called mastery learning, is that you should know as much at the end, or you should know more at the end than you know at the beginning. And the only way you get to mastery is through formative feedback. And the only way that you have meaningful formative feedback if it's non-punitive. I mean, it's all basic cognitive theory. And so the midpoint evaluation, the midterm to me, is nothing more than an opportunity to say, okay, can you do this? Okay, here's what you did wrong. Here's what you did right. There's no real penalty attached to it. The only requirement is that you do it and turn it in on time. And then I'll provide you with an answer sheet that gives you all the right answers and lays out the process and all like that. I'll do a follow-up video that I'll walk through the exam itself and try to explain all those things. And we'll attach it to a help session.
Okay.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how many people in the class. I think there's 12 or 18, I don't know, 16, 18, something like that. 16, 18 A's, that's fine. Got no problem. As long as people do what I ask them to do and take the feedback.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess then I'm just going to go play videos and then play around in JASP.
And feel free to stop the videos and go have a drink and come back. That's fine too. Sometimes it helps a little bit actually to kind of understand the way I do things. But don't look for over complexity, because the one thing about having this expertise is that, yeah, I can make it real complex, but what's the point?
Agreed.
And so look at simplicity, and if you think there's a hidden message, there's not.
Okay.
Yeah, never is a hidden message.
Okay. Okay.
It is that straightforward. It is
that
that
is
simple.
really good to know. Thank you. Yeah.
Other folks, questions?
Yeah, I'll just agree with Maria. I've gotten into quite a bit of the material, but not the topic 3 yet. And so I am going to hold my questions until I work through some of these examples.
I'm going to be here 2 nights a week.
Yeah.
We're live here 2 nights a week. So feel free. 2 shows a week, 6 and 7. And obviously the other thing is that there are lots of instances in which your question is a question everybody else has too. But there are occasions when it's not. And so if you think you have this very unique question, email me and we'll do a one-on-one Zoom or something like that, and we'll walk through it. We'll work through it.
All right. That sounds good.
You know,
Okay.
That's the only thing I can offer,
Yeah.
but I can't read your mind, so it's up to you. I mean, you gotta, yell at me and say, hey, I don't get any of this related to whatever. Let's talk. Can we talk? And I'll be glad to. And in the help sessions, we'll do the same thing as much as possible. If you're, if there seems to be a common question people are having or a common misunderstanding or whatever, we'll deal with it. We'll just that'll be the topic for the night.
Mhm.
So I have a conflict with another class on Thursday nights. So,
Email me a question if you have questions.
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I just don't want you to think I'm not interested because I probably won't be able to appear on Thursday nights.
Maria, I am 70 years old. I've given up trying to figure out what people's motivations are. So I'm here and, that's kind of the way I go. I assume everybody makes their own decisions based on their own circumstances and, the forces in your life, and that's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
I mean, I just appreciate, I think you clarified a whole bunch of preconceived notions that we had that we are a bunch of overthinkers anyway. So, but I came into stats with preconceived notions. So you just explained that all really well.
Well, it's, everybody does. I mean, and I'm not trying to say I'm super special or anything like that, but there's an awful lot of bad stats teachers out there that come out of math or come out of computer science or something like that. And the basic, the genesis of stats is really more a logical, philosophical genesis. I mean, it's a deductive logic. If we know certain things, we can predict certain outcomes. Well, if we predict an outcome, then let's test it. Let's run an experiment and test that outcome and see how true that is. Because ultimately, the only way that you know that something has a particular outcome is if you actually do the test, do the study or the test and figure it out. And I was kind of poorly using the example of the booster shot on the COVID vaccination. We can't know. We can't know how long this, when they ask the question about are we going to need boosters and when that's going to be. I look at people on TV try to deal with that question, and they can't, because it's an unknowable at this point. We can't predict what the outcome will be because, antibodies don't dissipate. Often they don't dissipate, and when they do dissipate, they dissipate at erratic rates. And you may be perfectly fine for 5 years, and suddenly in the 6th year, you're not producing those antibodies anymore. And so it's, the notion that we can predict what that outcome will be, given that we're still in the first year when people actually started getting these vaccinations. And the only thing we can say so far is, seems like it works for about a year, because that's all we know. As we know, another 6 months or 8 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years down the line, then we can begin to know more. But right now we're working off of incomplete information, and so we can't really make that projection or that. The only people that are making that projection are the drug companies, and that's because they make more money with booster shots. And so it's understandable why they might do that, but right now, from a purely statistical research-based model, and I'm a research methodologist, that's my field, we can't know. We just, we'll know when we know. And that never seems to satisfy people, to tell them we'll know when we know. It's like telling my wife, it is what it is. I mean, that's really not that's the worst line ever. And it's taken me 40 years to figure that one out. But it's true. I mean, we can know only what we have information to know, and otherwise, it's a mystery. It's an unknowable. So I just tell everybody to be reasonably calm about statistics and understand that It's a way of talking about probabilities. That's all it is. It's a way of what's the likelihood of these things occurring. And yeah, if we can predict well and it's right most of the time, spot on. But you know, it is that. It is a prediction. 1 in 262 million to win the lottery, yet somebody does. Somebody hits that data point. So you never really rule things in or rule things out. You just talk in terms of probabilities. And if you get used to thinking about things in terms of likelihoods or probabilities, then you don't set yourself up for, you know, failure or being surprised later on. Other thoughts, questions? You know, if you all want to talk particular technical things in the help sessions coming up, glad to do it. If you want to talk interpretive things, glad to do that too. You have to kind of let me know where you need to go. But first off, you got to get the stats piece, the mechanics of it going. And that's the whole JASP thing, is to get the mechanics of dealing with data going. And then learning how to deal with data after that is just a matter of repetition. That's all it ever is. Questions? I mean, I could beat my gums all night, but you don't want to necessarily hear that. So if you don't have particular questions, you know, I'll be back on the same stage tomorrow. And, you know, this video will be up a little bit later tonight, although I don't know why you would watch it again if you've had to sit through it the first time. So, you know, those of you that I see tomorrow night, I'll see you tomorrow night. Those of you that I won't see till next week, I'll see next week. And those of you that have individual questions you want to deal with, email me and we'll figure it out. We'll set something up.
That sounds good. And I think I missed the time on the Thursday night.
Somebody said that maybe 6 was a little early, so I said 7's fine. I mean,
7. Okay. Thank you.
so we'll do 7 tomorrow night.
Okay.
I just can't do my Mondays and Tuesdays and of course Fridays. We'll have help session on Friday. Yeah. My Mondays and Tuesdays are already booked. So the only 2 nights I can do is Wednesday and Thursday. And so I'm going to do both of those nights. And as we get closer to the end of the course, we'll talk about where we go from here. But right now I'm waiting to see where we are when we get 4 or 5 weeks in.
Thank you.
Good
Okay.
night.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right. We all have a
Yeah.
good evening, and I will see some of you tomorrow, and I'll see some of you next week, and maybe I'll see some of you never again. I don't know. Who knows? Okay. Well,